brand ambassadors. Don't be shy. If you are a brand founder, if you're someone that goes to demos as a consumer, you're in Whole Foods on the weekend, and you see a brand ambassador for another brand or agency doing a great job, don't be afraid to exchange info. I've gotten brand ambassadors on our team from doing that as well. Also, another thing, don't be shy about recruiting from other vocations. I have recruited brand new brand ambassadors that didn't even know what brand ambassadorship was. I've introduced them to our industry. I've brought them in because I believe they had talent that related very well. And, two vocations where I've had the most success with in terms of recruiting has been both teachers and then real estate agents. I think with teachers, they just have that natural inherent ability to educate consumers about better for you products or just products in general, depending on what kind of brand you are. Real estate agents, they have that sales background, but they know how to be efficient and manage their time. So those are two vocations as well. Sometimes servers and bartenders, they're in the customer service industry. They just have a knack for being able to, connect with people. LinkedIn Jobs is another outlet you can explore. You get one free job on job post on LinkedIn. Might as well use it if you're a brand or agency out there. Look into that as well. And this is something that I stress to startups. There's a lot of startup founders that are new to CPG. They came up with a great product idea and they're just kind of learning the industry as they go along. They get told by a retailer or distributor or a broker, hey, you need to start demoing your product. And they don't know where to begin. And one of the places where I would tell them to begin is your friends and family, because they are typically going to work the hardest for you initially. They understand the sacrifice and what's at stake for you, and they're going to work pretty hard. One of the things that I remember working for Super Coffee quite a few years ago, when Jim, Jordan, and Jake started that company, obviously they were doing a lot of demos themselves, but they got their friends and family involved. Even their mom was doing demos for them at Whole Foods. So don't be afraid to enlist members of your family to come in there and help out with your demos.
Just to jump in there really quick, and another place that I've had a lot of success with recruiting from other vocations are gyms and personal trainers, especially for the better for you space. Those are people that, tend to want to make their own schedule because they do have a pretty regimented lifestyle. And this is a really good role for someone who wants to do part-time work or wants to control their own scheduling. So that's another place where you can really tap into talent.
Okay. Couldn't agree more there. Now, once you've gone out and you've started the recruiting process, you have candidates in your queue, you need to vet them. You can't just let anyone that is interested in working for you work for you, especially if you're a brand founder. So there's, ways to vet candidates, to vet new talent before you bring them into your system. First, if you're using Trusted Herd like me, do not ignore the reviews. Never ignore them. Take time to review the star ratings and reviews from other agencies and brands. I do recommend ignoring the peer reviews because I have run team events for other companies in the past. And what I learned was a lot of the brand ambassadors trade reviews, regardless of whether or not they truly believe their teammate for that day was a good brand ambassador. As long as that brand ambassador agrees to give them a positive review on Trusted Herd, they'll say whatever they need to say about that other brand ambassador to get the positive review from them. So peer reviews don't have a lot of value to me, but reviews from brands and agencies mean the world to me. If someone is 3.5 stars or lower, I will not consider them. If they have at least one do not call, do not show negative mark on their review on trustedherd.com, I won't consider them. If they no-showed for someone else, chances are they're going to no-show for me at some point. Absolutely. Also important to state physical requirements in the job ad. If you have certain expectations, if you want your demo to run a certain way and there's certain needs that you have in order for that demo to operate, you need to state that in your job description. For example, if you do not want a brand ambassador to be seated for 4 hours at Whole Foods representing your brand, but you didn't state that physical requirement was standing for up to 4 hours, and then you go and see them and they need a physical accommodation and they're sitting down, that's not on them. That's on you because you did not clearly express the needs and the requirements for working for your brand or agency. Also, pictures tell 1,000 words. Whether you're looking at Trusted Herd or you're looking on LinkedIn, or even if you use Indeed for job ads, you know, you need to get pictures of your brand ambassadors. And when you get those pictures and review those pictures, you should want brand ambassadors to be photographing themselves doing BA things. Brand ambassadors applying for brand ambassador jobs should be sending you pictures of them doing brand ambassador things. I cannot stress that enough. When you go on Trusted Herd, you'll see it. If you haven't been on it before and you start to use it, you're going to see it that some brand ambassadors, they have pictures of that. They look like dating profile pics, or they're party pics. And I scratch my head. And, you know, they're out, you know, having a great time, and that's great, but that is not the message that you should be communicating to an employer. If you're a brand ambassador watching this, when you have your pictures and you put them in your profile on Trusted Herd, it should be you behind a demo table or an event interacting with people. And if you don't have those pictures, get them. And if you're, you know, a brand founder or a field marketing manager reviewing those pictures on Trusted Herd, you should take note of that. Those can send some red flags as long as you pay attention. During the video interviews, you should make sure, well, I should backtrack here. Once you find a candidate that you like, you should interview them, and you should do it via video. We have the technology now. It's everywhere. Everyone can do a video interview. You can do it from your phone. I have old, young, everybody in between can jump on a Google Meet. They can jump on a Zoom. You should be able to video interview all your candidates, no exceptions. Jason, when I started out as a brand ambassador 10 years ago, I worked for a couple agencies. They hired me without interviewing me. I just sent my resume in. They said, great, you're hired. When can you start? And I said to myself, if I was to ever run my own company or my own demo program, I'm going to meet everyone that gets behind the demo table for me. I don't know how people hire sight unseen. Great pictures are great, but how do you know that the candidate looks like their picture? Jason, anything to add there? I saw you get a little animated there.
I mean, I feel like I could add a million things because I've fallen on my face a couple of times with people myself. So definitely state in you know, when you're lining out the responsibility, if they need to drive there, if they need transportation, you need to ask, do you have a valid driver's license? You need to ask, do you have reliable transportation? You need to ask these little simple questions. Do you have an iPhone? Do you have something that can download an app to use on your phone? I've had so many times where I'm like, man, it's like I just could not imagine someone using still an iPhone 5, and sure enough, they still have an iPhone 5, and it's like you can't even download an app on it anymore. And I'm just like, okay, so those are questions you really need to make sure you're vetting out first and foremost, because it's going to save you a lot of headaches down the road.
When you mentioned the transportation verification, which is part of the job requirement, I'm sure you've been in this situation. Have you ever hired a brand ambassador, probably in the New York area, North Jersey or New York, and then you get the demo report and they're like, oh, you're not going to pay my $80 Uber cost. It's like, wait, when were you going to tell me that it was going to take $80 for you to get from your apartment to the store? When were you going to explain that to me?
It's happened.
And that leads into making sure during the interview, be clear in defining expectations to the candidate. This is very important because, you know, if someone were to be a fly on the wall for one of my interviews, when I interview a candidate, they would notice right away that I do a lot of talking at the beginning of the interview. I've had candidates even say, wow, you talk more than any interviewer that I've ever, experienced. And for me, I want to explain my expectations. I want to explain what it is that we're doing, what the brand is, how everything works. And I want them to know the expectations. I want that clearly communicated to them. And if you are a sales-driven company, or you want to be a sales-driven company when it comes to demos, you need to explain that to your brand ambassador. Don't just assume that. Clearly state those expectations and state what you need them to be prepared to do on behalf of your brand. Don't assume things. Get it out in the open and make sure there's no questions after the fact, like those Uber costs that I've had to pay a couple times. And then also, if you're a founder, another thing to not be afraid of, go deep if necessary. If you're bootstrapped and you're going to tell me that every demo is life or death for you, I can understand that. Then make sure you go the extra mile in the vetting process. Don't be afraid to perform a background check. And if you're going to do that, I do advise, I am not a lawyer, so you would want to consult with a lawyer regarding the consent and procedure process. Make sure you would do that before you would subject a candidate to a background check. But also, don't be afraid to ask for references. Sometimes references are nothing more than an IQ test, because really, who gives a bad reference to someone nowadays? That being said, if someone can't provide you 3 good references, that could be a red flag to consider. And now we're going to go into red flags, green flags. These are some warning signs to consider when you're going through the vetting process, but also some good signs to take note of when you're going through that process. So I'll go from left to right. Red flag here: candidate is slow to respond, repeatedly uses poor grammar and punctuation. So the green flag side to that is the counter: candidate responds to all emails and texts quickly, is easy to understand and communicate with. How they communicate with you during the vetting process is pretty much going to be a strong example of how they're going to communicate with you once you've hired them. So take note of that. Another red flag: candidate is aloof during recruiting, over communicates leading up to the interview. There's a line, I think it's from American Gangster, the Denzel Washington playing the Frank Lucas character. He says the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. And if a brand ambassador is trying to give you their life story and constantly contacting you before the interview even starts, that's a concern. Also, you want to work with candidates that are organized. And what I mean by that, a candidate that isn't organized, they're not sure what they applied for. And then they start asking you questions. They want you to remind them, what job is it what company is it that you're with? What's the rate? What are the dates? If all of that's stated in a job ad and they're asking you to remind them of things, that means they're not organized. And this is a remote position. Brand ambassadorship is a remote position. You're not going to be there all the time to watch and see what they're doing. So if they're disorganized leading up to the interview, they're going to be disorganized during their demos. Another thing to also keep an eye on: TMI, too much information. Also, oversharing in a situation where they should be trying to impress you. That shows poor judgment skills. And if they have poor judgment skills during the interview, you have to really be concerned about how their judgment skills are going to translate when they're doing a demo and they're interacting with your customers. Be very wary of that. The green flag to that: the candidate expresses excitement for the opportunity to interview and makes it clear they are excited about the possibility of representing your brand. Red flag: candidate asks questions that could have been answered if they simply took the time to read your job description. It's a remote position. You're going to give them written instructions on how to properly execute the demo. If they're not reading the job description, they're probably not going to read the training. They're probably not going to read the instructions that you have for them. And you can't always pick up the phone and talk to 20 to 50 brand ambassadors to communicate a simple change individually 20 to 50 times. Sometimes you need to send an email and you need your team to read that email. The green flag component to that is candidate asks great questions that weren't addressed in a job description. It shows that they are inquisitive, they have an interest, and they are going to anticipate potential issues that can be addressed ahead of time if they just are a forward thinker. Red flag here: when you ask them why they applied, the candidate focuses solely on money, location, and only their needs. The green flag is when you ask a candidate why they applied, the good answers that you want to hear are: the candidate expresses an interest in your company, in your brand, and they demonstrate to you at some point that they have performed a level of research coming into the interview. That's very important. That wins a lot of points with me. Red flag: candidate interrupts during interview frequently, asks questions that you already addressed in the interview, lacks focus during the interview. Their eyes are darting everywhere. They're looking at their phone. They're moving stuff around. They need to be focused on the interview. If they're not focused during the interview, what reason do you have to believe that they're going to be focused during the demo and being able to properly engage customers? Also, they repeatedly tell you how great they are, how much they sell, and how busy they are. They keep pumping themselves up ad nauseum. That, to me, is a sign of insecurity. And in my experience, the brand ambassador that goes over the top and telling you how great they are, really, they're not that great of a seller. The green flag response to that is the candidate lets you finish statements and questions before they respond. They stay on point in response to the questions, and they give thoughtful answers to your questions. They're also confident in their abilities, but not cocky. Another red flag, Jason. I want to get your perspective on this. Candidate starts asking questions about software, the software you use to manage your demo program, and then digital GPS check-in. Is there a check-in? Is there a checkout? Do I have to sign in with someone? What are the photo requirements? And they keep asking these types of probing questions. And then they ask, well, who's going to be at the demo with me? Is anyone going to be there with me? And the candidate leaves you wondering if they're probing you just to see if they can get paid for a fake demo. Are there any triggers, questions like that, Jason, when you're vetting a candidate during an interview where you're like, man, I think this guy's trying to feel me out to see if they can get away what they can get away with?
That's a really good point. I've actually had that happen where someone I kind of caught on to, whereas I think they were doing that to a lot of brands, and I was just going to be another one of those brands. Like they were kind of asking like, hey, do I have to like take pictures? Do I have to be, and to your point, we use an app, it's on your phone and you clock in by GPS. And that was a huge issue and I mentioned, I was like, do you have an updated phone? Is that an issue? And it wasn't the issue. So I quickly just was zagged. I was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work out. I just want to hammer this home. These red flags, green flags, founders, hiring managers, whoever you are, field marketing team managers, this is the face of your brand in retail and to the customers. Like you want to make sure that person is buttoned up as possible, and they don't have to be perfect. Sometimes I've gotten some emails and I'm just like, holy cow, like they obviously didn't, spend too much time, writing this and thinking it out. But you will get a really good feel for the personality. And, honestly, I've had people who can't send me an email that have turned out to be incredible and still work with them because they are so good with interacting and selling the items and just communicating and getting that customer to buy it. So I don't want to say that this is always the case. So, there's a lot of hiring that there is that kind of gut feel. Experience is huge. If they can tell you something about what they've done in the past for a brand, that's massive to me. If a candidate shows up to me and they have no idea what they're interviewing for and they haven't tried the product and they haven't even invested their time to go to the website, it's a quick 3-minute conversation. I'm like, hey, you know what? I set this up with you a week ago.
Yeah.
You didn't even take the time to go to the website, find out what the product is, and you want to sell this for money? Like, I don't really think you're going to work out. And that's reality, and that's going to happen a lot.
And then the green flag counter to those probing questions, you want a candidate that focuses more on impressing you and less about logistics. They want to talk to you about their philosophies on engaging and selling. And really, they give you no reason to believe that they're trying to see if they can get one over on you with a fake demo. Last red flag here, candidate ignores job openings at store locations closest to them and only wants to work locations furthest from them. It begs the question, why don't they want to work locations in their community? Why are they willing to spend so much more money to drive an hour away from where they live when they could demo 10 minutes from their home? The green flag to that is candidate prefers to stay local and doesn't need to travel. This usually means they have good or great relationships with store managers and members of their community. It also means candidate is good at what they do and has enough work being offered to them that they don't need to impair their income with extra travel costs. Anything to add there on that last red flag, green flag point?
No, honestly, that's a great red flag, green flag, because that's something that I would never even thought to put on this slide, but it's very important. So great call outs. Yeah.
Now let's go to the decision process. You've gone through the recruiting, you've gone through the vetting. Now you've got to make a decision whether or not to bring a new member onto your team. It's easy to hire someone, not always as easy to let someone go. So you want to make the right decision from the jump. And for me, the decision whether or not to hire a brand ambassador, it's not rocket science. I think some people try to overanalyze things. I worked with one company. They wanted us to keep a scorecard. And I said, no, it's one question. And that question is, if it's not a yes, to hiring them, then it's a no. There's no middle ground. There's no maybe. There's no, well, let's try this, or what if we do this? Now, if the answer is not a yes, if you're not excited to bring that brand ambassador onto your team, do not hire them. It's if you have, trust your gut. If there's something that's telling you that there's something wrong, there probably is. There's no maybes when it comes to potentially hiring a candidate. Remind yourself at all times, you're the one offering the job and the candidate is the one asking for the job. You hold all the cards in that relationship. And if after the interview you aren't certain you want to work with them, don't hire them. And if a candidate can't impress you or concerns you before they have the job, chances are things will only get progressively worse once you've awarded them the position. I'm going to go, this is a little bit of a sidebar, and some people are saying, where's he going with this? But a lot of people in broken relationships, I have friends that have been, bad breakups or divorces. And, they tell me, even while the relationship's going on, they're telling me what's going on. It's bad. It's bad. They're doing this. They're doing that. They're not doing this. And then they get married. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why are you getting married? Oh, well, if we get married, they'll be better. And then they get married. Things get even worse. And then they have kids. And then I say, why are you having kids? And they say, oh, well, I thought if we had have a kid together, things would get better. And that applies to employment when you're a hiring manager. If someone's not impressing you during the interview process, giving them the job isn't magically going to make them better. If you give them the job and you have an underperforming employee and they're asking you for more hours, they're asking you for more money or more responsibility, rewarding them for failure with more responsibility and more money isn't going to make them a better employee. Reward the employees that are under your management that are producing, that deserve to move up the ladder. So yeah, I mean, if things are bad from the start, they're not going to get better once you give them the job. That's the point I'm trying to convey there. And this is, I think, my last slide, Jason, before I'm going to throw it over to you. But one of the number one failures I see when it comes to demo programs that underperform is the lack of training. There's a lot of work hiring brand ambassadors, getting them the assets, getting them scheduled, getting them onboarded. There's so much work that goes into that I think sometimes just through fatigue, that a lot of brands and agencies, they forget the final step before they actually launch the demo campaign, and that is the training. Separation is in the preparation. There's the old quote from Abraham Lincoln: "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." And that's what training is. It's the axe sharpening. If you send a brand ambassador out there, no matter how good they are, without any training or any guidance, the really good brand ambassadors, eventually 2, 3, 4 demos in, they'll figure it out on their own. And they may even be able to tell you how to demo your own product. But if you want to hit the ground running, don't leave them empty-handed. Don't overlook the training aspect. You've got to have a plan for training. It's so important. And the most effective training that I've seen in terms of numbers, when we do brand ambassador consultants, when we launch campaigns, big campaigns, whether it's at Costco or at Whole Foods, brands have certain bandwidth and certain budgets when it comes to training. But the ones that invest in doing a live webinar right before we kick off a large scale campaign, where the brand is leading the vast majority of the training and they're connecting directly with the brand ambassadors, those are the campaigns where we see the best ROI. It's not a coincidence. You can send a PDF, you can send a Loom, and some brand ambassadors will pay attention to it and they'll watch it. There's nothing like meeting founders or full-time sales managers or full-time field marketing directors that work directly for the brand. They know you know them now. And even if they were to read what you send them, what if they have questions? Now you're on with them live and you can respond directly to their questions. And I just think it's a great way to do things. And that's what I would recommend. But whatever you do, you have to train your brand ambassadors. Jason, I'll go back to another situation. When I started out as a brand ambassador, I would work for certain agencies and I would get zero training. I would just show up, and I don't think they cared whether or not I sold product. They just wanted to make sure I took pictures and sent those pictures in with the report so they could invoice their client. And, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I feel like I was smart enough. Hey, if I didn't know the product, I would look at the back of the packaging and just use the back of the packaging as my cheat sheet. But I think it's just you got to have something. You got to have a plan for training. You can't just assume they're going to know your product.
100%, Sam. No, and honestly speaking, I've had a lot of situations in my career too where it's been like that. But also, you don't want to just hire a warm body behind a table, right? You have to invest some time. You have to make sure that they're aware of all the nuances that makes your product special. You don't want someone just to sell one unit to one person one time. You want someone to sell, well, hopefully more than one unit to one person at one time, but you also want them to create a fan that's going to come back and buy multiple units, and hopefully tell their friends about your product, and tell their friends will tell their friends. It's not only just about the sale. It's about the experience that customer has.
Thank you.
And with the brand, like I said, they're the face of your brand. If you have that really positive experience, even if the customer isn't really like, oh, I can find a use for this in my life all the time, it's okay if they just sell one item that one time. But just that ability to really connect, build rapport, and really explain to them, like, hey, this is why this is a little bit more. It's especially important with premium items. Why? You have to have the why. Like, why am I spending an extra $2 for this unit? Explain this to me. And if you have a brand ambassador, product specialist, whatever you want to call them, that can't answer those questions, they're not going to succeed at a high level. Investing that time is so important to make sure that they're prepared. Every team member I've hired, I've spent at least a half hour, or if not an hour, with a paid training, one-on-one, individually, actually pitching to them how I sell it. And I don't give them a script. To me, like, scripts to me are, I don't want someone to memorize something and read it off to someone every time. Like, first and foremost, people aren't going to buy from that person. You might as well just have a robot in the store selling something to them.
That could happen one day with AI. You never know.
Oh man, Sam, I hope not. I don't know what else I'm going to do in my life at this point, but
no, you touched on a point there that I want to kind of expound on, because it takes me back to one of the first products I ever demoed. It's Garden of Flavor, and it's Garden of Flavor. If you're not aware, is a premium juice. It's around $8 at Whole Foods, and it used to be sold at just about every Whole Foods, and they had a lot of SKUs. And there were competing juice brands that you could get for $3 or $4 for half the price. But before I started, I was able to meet with the founder of the company, Lisa Reed, and Lisa explained to me why her juice was different than the other juices. And I learned things like the whole process that she used, cold press. I didn't know. I knew the term. I didn't know what cold press was. I didn't know that most of the other juices at Whole Foods were heat pasteurized and killed off a lot of the nutrients and the vitamins. And I would, people would try the juice. I'd give them the sample, and they'd say, "I'd like it, but $8. I'm not paying this." And then I would explain why it was $8 and the what they were getting for that additional money. And quite a few customers said, "You know what? Wow, I didn't know that. It is worth the extra $4 if I'm going to get, I thought I was getting nutritional value from these other heat pasteurized juices. Now that I've learned that I'm going to go with Garden of Flavor." So that is the importance of educating your team, taking the time to speak with them directly. If you're a premium product, like Jason said, they've got to be able to clearly communicate to the customer why it costs more. It costs more to buy because it costs more to make. But what are the benefits? Why am I buying a pasta sauce that's $8 instead of buying ragu for $3? Now, Jason, so that's kind of the build up to a demo program, the build up to launching a demo program. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. Jason is going to go over the keys and the best practices for maintaining a demo program in terms of driving sales and trial through the register. So I'm going to bring up this next slide here, Jason, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. I'm Jason Smith. If you don't know who I am, I've been doing demos in retail for a really, really long time, since around 2006. So I've sold a lot of different things, had a lot of success with some brands. Learned a lot of tricks and trades, but the one consistent thing that I always had an issue with is, you hire the brand ambassador, they go in and do a demo. They say they sold 100 units, right? How do you actually know that, right? So what I started to realize, like, first and foremost, if you're going to build a demo program, you have to be able to get register data from that retailer. It's really important. It's really the core building stone. Like, you can start launching into other retailers where you don't have that information available, readily available. But for you to really learn about how successful one of your team members is, you really need to be able to pull the register data. So what I mean register data, for instance, like, there's retailers like Wegmans who don't allow demos currently, Whole Foods, places like that. They actually have a portal. You can pull your sales data per day, per week, whatever you want to, whatever your cadence is. It's really important that you're analyzing that information. Everybody analyzes their data, whether it's Spins, Nielsen. All right. That's really important for everyone in this space right now, right? If you're meeting with the category manager, you need to be able to show them, where your growth is, where you are in the category as opposed to everyone else. Nobody's really done that for demos before, right? Like everybody was like, well, we just kind of like just do demos, and we go to these stores and we sell this many units, but we really can't prove it. So I wanted to create a program that actually analyzed every demo and every performance and build KPIs and spiffs, and which is a sales incentive and everything, to really create a very robust demo program, which is what I've done for my last 2 years. So this is all about measuring ROI, right? The incremental sales. I'm just going to explain an incremental sale to you really quick for those people who don't know what an incremental sales is. An incremental sale is, so if you take your USW, your baseline sales for that account, if you want to do it weekly, monthly, whatever you want to do, I always use the weekly USW. And what I'll figure out is, I know this, I'm just going to use a scenario, right? This store, when we first started doing demos, sold 6 units on average per day, right? So I use that information. So that's 6 units that I know is pretty much on average going to sell. Now, there's no perfect science. Obviously, Saturdays and Sundays are going to sell more units than maybe Wednesdays and Thursdays, but it's an average, and it's something that at least it gives you some kind of metric to measure against. And then you have to also take into consideration, are you purchasing the product to use for the demo? So we send our team in with VIP coupons, free coupons to get the product, to secure the product for the demo. So I always say, you use 6 VIP coupons per demo. I'm going to subtract six of your items per demo to get to the incremental sales. So our team is aware of that, right? So going into the demo, they already are at, there's already 12 units that's already sold through the register without any demo. So anything after that is incremental. So every unit is measured incrementally. So that's really important, because if you're just measuring it as a whole, how many units you sold, it's really hard to really gauge your baseline growth. And you really want to be able to analyze your baseline growth, because that's really where the communication starts to go to the sales team more than the marketing team. And it's going to help them secure more accounts and show really what you're doing in retail and how you're having success. So I'm going to go into this in more detail here, and I'm going to show you some slides where I've actually created with a team called GTM Gurus. Kevin and Chris, 2 great guys. Please look into them. They're awesome. Please go back to that last slide really quick, Sam. I just want to carry all this. So everything that I use to determine whether the demo is effective: incremental sales, like I mentioned, long-term baseline and the growth. I have a slide for that, right? And I'll explain that. CAC, customer acquisition costs. You have to figure out, it's kind of like a break-even point, but not really the break-even point math, right? It's demo staff costs, samples, and logistics. Once you figure out what you need to sell to get you into that situation, to get you to the number that you need to be successful for that demo, that's your KPI. What I figured out for Ithaca Hummus, it was 36 units. So I needed to get 36 units to the register per 4 hours for us to at least have a break-even point for that customer.
And a lot of brands don't know that. They don't know that.
Well, math is not everybody's favorite thing. Fortunately, I love math. So it's something my brain works the numbers. So it's just, these are things I started creating, and hopefully it makes sense to everyone. So, but there's other things that go into this too. Store selection. It's really good to know the rankings of each store in that retailer. You do not need to demo every store in every banner. You need to demo the best stores in every banner. Why? Because there's no category manager looking at every store's sales data when you're going into that review, whatever it is, whether it's by yearly, whether it's bi-yearly. They're basically looking at the whole conglomerate. They're looking at the macro. They're not looking at the micro. They want to see velocities. That's it. You can push a lot of velocities in the top accounts a lot easier than pushing velocities in these smaller accounts that might not have the store traffic. And that's also where this comes into play with timing. Timing is everything with demos. Saturdays and Sundays, obviously, those are the days that win. Everybody knows that. But come summer, right? Coastal towns, mountain towns, lake towns, you're going to see a lot of drop off in the sales, definitely in the summer, because people aren't shopping. They're out at the lake, they're at the beach. But those Mondays and Fridays around those weekends are crazy busy in those areas. So you really have to be like, all right, my strategy needs to change seasonally. And this is, I know, and it's a lot to think about, but it's also a lot to think about struggling and spending all this money towards demos and not succeeding. And I see so many brands do that. Why? Because they don't have a target. They don't have a KPI in place. They don't really understand what they need to sell to be successful. And there's no one really saying, hey, I need this many units through the register to justify this program. Yeah. And that's where this comes into. Another really important thing is, and this is something where partnering up with a retailer after you show success is really important. And that's securing more than enough inventory to support the demo. You want to have at least 2 more days of shelf stock enable for them to backfill that order. Otherwise, you don't want to sell out. Selling out the shelf, yeah, it looks great when you walk out of the store and you can say, oh, I sold it out. It doesn't really do you a whole lot of favors. That's 2 or 3 days without velocities on that shelf. Yeah, you sold a ton on that day, but now you have 2 or 3 days without any movement.
No sales. Yep.
And that's going to do, it's not really going to show a really positive ROI, right? It's not going to show, your velocities aren't really looking that great. Yeah, sure, you had this really strong day and it's going to be better, but it's still not showing the true story of what your brand can do. And you're also leaving a hole where that customer might come back the next day or two and want to buy your product again, and they can't find it. And they're like, well, there's this other brand that might be similar, so I'm going to purchase it. So that's another thing you have to really take into consideration. Utilizing tools to analyze incrementality and all the things I just spoke about is very important. And what I found to be the most effective using GTM gurus is Power BI. Sam, go ahead and do the next slide.
Before we get to the next slide, because there's a lot to unpack. You just dropped a wealth of knowledge with this slide here. First, I've got a comment and then a question for you. Comment. So you hit the nail on the head when you talked about not having to demo at every store, because I interact with a lot of brands, a lot of brand founders. They feel like they have to. And unless it's Costco, there isn't an equal spend policy at Whole Foods or Sprouts. You can cherry pick. You can use the 80-20 rule. You can get 80% of your sales from the top 20 stores in Whole Foods, in Sprouts. You want to go an inch wide, mile deep, and build that sales funnel. Drive the sales through the top stores. And you also talked about the category buyer. A good category buyer knows the weaker selling stores in their chain.
Yeah. And
if they're a good buyer, they're not going to expect a brand to sell well where products in general don't sell well. So keep that in mind. That that's going to help you properly invest your field marketing dollars using that 80-20 mentality. Now, the question I have, Jason, so one of the things I love about Whole Foods is you mentioned that portal. You're a vendor, you sign up, you get accepted into Whole Foods, and you get access to that portal, and you have free access to your data. You know what your numbers are. When I've worked on the brand side, a little bit different when we were dealing with retailers that weren't Whole Foods. There are companies out there, data companies that buy the data. They buy your data from the retailer, and then they try to sell it to you. So, you've worked for emerging brands that were in between, brands that were large. What type of brand, at what point should they start thinking about buying data?
That's a really good question, Sam, because honestly, that's kind of going to be a case-by-case scenario. But there's also ways that you can get around having to do that. And the reason why I say that is if you're going to, Whole Foods is unique, right? They have demos built into their strategy. They expect brands to do demos. They have a portal that you sign up for demos that they charge for. They have they actually have tables. They have everything there for like Whole Foods knows they make money from demos. They know that, and they want brands to demo, right? So that's great. What happens when you go to the conventional retailers and they want you to use the third parties for all this money and they don't want you to use your people? First and foremost, you don't want to demo those. You want to find the conventional retailers that will let you do demos. But to do a really successful program in a conventional retailer, you need to control your distribution. It's not going to happen without that piece. And so you're going to have to spend a little extra money. You're going to have to find a DSD player, and they're going to be able to tell you and help you. Because if they're delivering product and your BA is saying, oh, I sold it all, and then they're going back to the store the next week and they're like, I didn't deliver anything to the store. And so it's a really tight relationship that you have to have. Getting that information and data from any conventional retailer, like Sam said, is really tough. But once you start establishing that DSD relationship with that, usually you can start to finesse that relationship with the category manager that, hey, can you start sending me the data from your store, even if it's a monthly drop, or even if it's just the numbers that were sold through the register weekly, which is what I get now from the conventional. I don't get it as drilled down as I can from Whole Foods, where I can pull day by day by day, but I can pull like the whole week, and then I can kind of nail down like, all right, well, there was this huge bump in this week from this store and it wasn't at this store. And that's where obviously where a demo happened. I can get as exact as possible. There's no perfect science to it. And you kind of have to be really scrappy like anything else in CPG to be successful with it. But there's ways to do it. I've done this. And this is just an example. Before I came on board, a major retailer discontinued Ithaca hummus. They had them in the warehouse, didn't succeed, right? Lost shelf space, SKUs were discoed, that's it. Really tough to get back in a retailer after that. It's really hard, especially with the same SKUs, okay? So what we did is we went to, unfortunately, this retailer is one of the older retailers and it has divisions, right? So we were able to nail down one division, and we were able to talk to them and say, hey, please give us a second chance with the DSD distributor, and we're just going to do demos. We didn't run one TPR, no other trade spend, just demos. That's all we did for 6 months. After 6 months, we were up over 100% in that account. We started expanding into the other divisions. 6 months later, we're at over 128%. Now we're talking about going back in the warehouse. So there is a strategy to demos that most people don't even realize that you can do. But you have to be really scrappy, like I said, and you have to be analytical, and you have to be willing to partner up with that retailer and show them that this is the way I'm going to do things. I know all these other brands do it this way, but we're going to do it this way because this is what works.
And you've given out this advice on the Demo Guys podcast. It's so important for emerging better for you brands to pursue and partner with the right retailers. Yeah. And I think the ability to demo is one, and then the ability to get the data that shows the ROI on that, the investment on that demo is very important. So I would say, for example, if you're at Expo West, and you're an emerging better for you brand, you shouldn't be going after Target. You should be going after Whole Foods first. You want to grow at Whole Foods and Sprouts before you start going after Target and Walmart, because you're going to have to demo through a third party at those bigger national retailers, and you're not really going to have a lot of visibility into whether or not your trade spends are yielding the results that you want. I mean, you'll be able to look at depletion reports at the KeHE warehouse, UNFI warehouse. You'll be able to see whether or not POs are coming in, but you're not really going to, unless you pay for the data, you're not going to know on a daily basis how many units are being driven through the registers.
You nailed it, Sam. And just for a live example of that, we spent $98 to sell one unit through a third-party demo team just recently because we were forced to use it in a major retailer. So avoid at all costs. That's all I can say, everyone. Like, I understand it's an easy out, and it's, the category manager will be like, oh yeah, use our third party. It's a hard no. It's a hard no.
Because 9 out of 10 times, for founders that are watching this, that third party of choice didn't get that designation by merit. They got it because they paid a concession to the retailer and they own the floor space. They don't want to compete with other agencies, or they don't want other actual brands coming in and representing their own product. The only way for them to succeed is to buy their business. So keep that in mind. They paid a concession. That's why they're the vendor, the demo vendor of choice. They didn't earn it on merit. So don't get me going here. But you mentioned some of these these data slides. I actually remember I recognize some of these brand ambassadors. But take it from here, Jason.
Wow, the irony. Yeah, it's definitely a small knit industry, right? But so here's the thing. So I worked with GTM Gurus. We created this Power BI, and it's awesome. Like we pull the Whole Foods portal data every week. We load it into. I basically load it into an Excel spreadsheet. They load it into Power BI, because it's all the data we really need. This is only going to be 3 smaller parts of it, but it's a much more extensive thing. And if anybody wants more information about it, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me, whatever. I'll definitely share. I know they'd be happy to work with other brands with this tool. But so basically what this does is there's 2. This is one of the parts of the Power BI. But what this is showing, it's kind of hard to see. The top line up here, that's the total incremental units by brand ambassador. So this is for February of 2025. So this is where you really can analyze, and this is where I build a lot of our spiffs off of, which I'll go through in shortly after this, because sales incentives are so important if you really want a return on investment and you want to retain your team. Honestly, retention's the hardest thing for product specialist brand ambassadors. And if you can show, if you invest in them, if they're making more money, if they're motivated to make more money, that's always really the key to success for any brand. So keep that in mind when you're building a demo program. But here you can see our top performers are up top, incremental units but the bottom line is really where where the meat of this is. That's the total incremental units per demo. And that's really important, because you need to measure out all right, I have to hit 36 units per demo. Who's not hitting those 36 units and who's way overachieving on those 36 units? And I use that a lot to really vet out and make harder decisions when I have to. When, if I have a budget cut, or I have a certain month where I know we're not going to have any TPRs and, the sales are going to be a little softer, those towards the bottom half are those are the people I'm going to either cut their demos back, or I'm not going to invest in them anymore, because at the end of the day, I have these people that are really high performers on that left side that I know they're going to sell 3 to 4 times X what they're going to do in their demo. And I'd much rather invest my money there. And it's just like anything else in life. You want to put your dollars where it makes the most sense. And this is a great way to analyze that. So this is one tool I use. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Sam.
Well, I'm looking at your BA roster there, the total incremental units per demo. I'm looking at all the brand ambassadors there. That Jason Smith guy, he's a pretty good brand ambassador.
I lead by example. I'm never going to ask someone to do what I'm not willing to go do myself. And that's kind of what makes my team maybe stay with me too, is I'm not that person who's go spend your weekends in the store. I'm going to go hang out with my family and not be present. I'm 24/7, man. They call me at 8:00 at night on a Saturday. I'm going to try to make time. It's one of those things, everybody has a crisis. It might not be a crisis, but you have to really be able to listen and coach and train and be there for your team. Because I've dealt with so many things that are out of the blue that I could never even imagine. But you know what? That number inspires the rest of the team. And that's why I continue to do that. And it's not to build my own ego. I know I can sell. I've been doing this a really long time. I don't expect them to keep up with me. I can literally sell in my sleep, I think, some days, but not to float my own boat. But it's just something I just have a knack to sell. But the cool thing is, if you can get people up there in those numbers, that's really what my goal is. I use this as a benchmark for them. I want you guys to be here. I don't expect you to be here, but I'm going to work with you to get here. So.
And with that, we'll go to the next slide.
So this is my favorite of all the slides, and it's really showing. So I can drill down by brand ambassador from that other slide. And that brand ambassador list So there's a lot of drill downs here, but this is really the meat and potatoes of the demo program, right? So this is for May, the last month, May 2025. It's hard to read the numbers. So it's 14,000, I think 321 units sold by our team, right? We did 223 demos. That's the hours over there. I already did the math. I divided it by 4 because they're 4-hour demos. The incremental units is the most important metric on here. That's 12,233. That's the measurement I'm using. So I take those 223 demos, I divide it into those incremental units. That means the team's averaging 55 incremental units per demo. My goal is 36, 55. That means 19 more units are selling per demo, and that's all revenue growth. And revenue is what you want to generate in a demo to help you fuel the rest of the growth. And if you're generating revenue and you're not losing revenue, you're in the sweet spot.
Time for the next slide.
Yes, sir. And this is the other one that I think is it really pertains to what your long-term goal is, baseline growth, right? You want to measure your long-term baseline growth. Like, what would happen if I do demos in the store and then I stop doing demos in the store, or I take a break from that store, or if I never go back to that store? And what if I never demo these other stores? Are they going to grow at the same level? Obviously they're not. And this is a really good way to look at that. So this is pulling in all the sales data from the Whole Foods that we've done demos at when we're not actually doing demos. So say it's an apple to apple comparison. Say it's the same Tuesday, no demos are happening that day. How many units are selling at the demo stores versus the non-demo stores? So the cool thing about a demo program, especially in Whole Foods, and I'm just gonna nail down why Whole Foods is so important to emerging brands to start with. And even with Sprouts, I understand they're considered a natural retailer and everybody loves Sprouts, and I do love Sprouts. But Sprouts also caters to a lot of people who, are kind of there for cheaper produce and stuff. The thing about Whole Foods, their customer base is a premium customer. Those people walk into Whole Foods, they're either trying to change their life or they're already pretty well-to-do or whatever, but everybody calls it whole paycheck for a reason. They know they're going to spend money there, right? They're not in there because they want to save. They're not there. It's not Aldi, right? They're there because I have the money, I have the disposable income. I'm not going to bat an eye at $5.99 hummus, right? So, Whole Foods has been the key to base this whole program off of, and that's why I'm showing it on Power BI. But if you can see this, which I know you really can't, but on the demo stores on non-demo days, and this is a year-over-year thing. So last year we've increased year-over-year almost 100%, up in 91% from last year. This demo program's been going on 2 years. Demo stores up 91%, 92% from last year. On average, selling about if you round up 16 units per day without demos. Last year, it was about 8. Now you go down to the non-demo stores where we've never done a demo. Last year was about 4.75 units. Now it's up to about 8, almost 9 units. So the great thing is rising tides lift all ships, especially in Whole Foods, because you're selling to a consumer base that is kind of niche, and they have friends who are shopping at Whole Foods, and they talk to their friends and they tell their friends, or they're buying 3 tubs of hummus and they're sharing it with their friends who shop at Whole Foods. Whatever that case is, that is exactly why I said you do not need to demo every Whole Foods. You just need to demo the right Whole Foods. And that's what we consistently do. We demo the top stores in Chicago, whether it's Lincoln Park and Lakeview. We demo the top stores in the Rocky Mountain region, Pearl, Cherry Creek. We demo the top stores in New York City, whether it's Brooklyn, Tribeca, whatever you want to. I mean, New York City is just a whole nother animal. In Austin, Lamar, Arbor Trails, Domain. Every area's got its special, unique stores, and those are the stores you focus your energy on. You focus your demos on, and you build this kind of data to show. And now you have all this information and data that you can kind of translate to the sales. And it kind of takes away from the marketing function and it goes to the sales function. And honestly, it's a great crossover for both. Hopefully I put that eloquently enough for everyone to understand.
It'll be on replay. They can watch it over and over again.
So, and last and not least, I just want to touch on BA retention. I mentioned it earlier, sales incentives based on KPIs. So I know that the KPI was 36 units. I'm never just going to aim for 36 units. I want to aim for higher than 36 units when I'm building a KPI. Why? Because why not? I want revenue growth. I don't want to just break even every demo. I want to make money every demo. So customer acquisition costs, dollars needed to be successful, 36 units. Are you achieving the needed velocities incrementally? That's the question you need to ask yourself. And to get there, you need to create a KPI based off the customer acquisition costs and use that number to create spiff sales incentives. So what I did, and this is pertaining specifically to the last brand that I was selling, but the spiff example, 36 units spiffs, same store, same day, 50 plus incremental units. So if the store sells 6 units on average, we use 6 VIP coupons to secure product for the demo. They need to get to 62 units before they make an extra $25. If they sell, so a lot of our team did doubles or 8 hours in the store, because I never want to send someone to travel and back to back. It's just too much work. I tell them set up your table, go take a lunch, take a break, do 2 demos, same store, just because we secured enough product to do that. Same store, same day, 100 plus incremental units, $50 bonus. This is all paid out at the end of the following month on the 15th. But it's all we just track it. It's all tracked on Power BI. And then there's the monthly incentives. And I just created this as an extra incentive for people to push really harder or do more demos for us. And it works like magic, because the more they sell, the more money they're going to make at the end of the month. I have brand ambassadors making 2,000 plus in incentives every month. I have brand ambassadors making over $60,000 part-time for us. It's unheard of for brand ambassador teams these days. And that's what really keeps them on the team, keeps them motivated, keeps them happy. It's really not that hard, guys.
And what I want to stress here, it's the importance of putting time and thought behind an incentive program. You really want to build a program, because it runs the gamut. There's a lot of different directions I can go in with regards to this. But I remember starting out about 10 years ago. I got into this industry as a brand ambassador. I worked for Adele's Gourmet Chicken Sausage, and they had bonuses. And I'll talk to founders, and they'll ask me, do you work with brands that offer bonus programs? And I say sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It's up to the brand, their budget. And I've had some of those founders say, well, why aren't they going to? Isn't the brand ambassador you're going to put at the demo table for us? Aren't they going to go the extra mile anyway? And I remember as a brand ambassador myself, wasn't that I was going to hold back unless there was a bonus. I found another gear when I knew that there was a bonus at the end of the rainbow. I was going hard no matter what, whether there was a bonus or not. But sometimes when that bonus, I knew there was a bonus, the ability to bring in extra income for my family, it just brought something out of me that I didn't know was already there. And that's really the point of the bonus. But, because I have some founders that they don't want to do any bonus of any kind. And then I have some that they are very adamant about doing a bonus, but they're not putting a lot of thought into it. And they just throw a very attainable number out there that's just going to cause them to lose money. So it goes to what Jason has said during this presentation. You got to know your number. You got to know your break-even point. You got to do the math, whether you like math or not. You got to do the math. It's kind of like, I'm a big fan of the show Bar Rescue. And John Taffer will go into these bars and these establishments, and he'll berate these owners because they don't know their food costs. They don't know how much money they're making when they sell an item. And there are founders out there that do not know whether they're losing money or making money on a demo. So you've got to do the research, you've got to get the numbers, and you got to find out what is that sweet spot. In the case of, Jason and Ithaca Hummus at 36 units through the register during a demo, that's the break-even spot. And you want to find your break-even spot, and you don't bonus anyone until they hit the break-even point. They shouldn't. I love my team. I love my brand ambassadors, and I'm a brand ambassador myself. I shouldn't make extra money until the brand I represent is making more money. Make it a true revenue share. When the brand is winning and making profit above and beyond, that's when you bring in the brand ambassador and include them in the win there. But couple other points here because it's just so much information and that you've given out here, Jason. So this data is important for having the data is important for a variety of reasons. But the two biggest points are when I worked at Super Coffee, one of my bosses there was a gentleman by the name of Frank Volante, one of the best field marketers you'll find in the industry. And he always talked to me about the importance of marketing the marketing. There's going to be people watching this that are founders, but there's also going to be people watching this that are field marketing directors or market managers. And you need to have these numbers. You need to know your numbers. You need to have these slides like this to be able to show the wins and the value that your demo program is bringing to the brand. Because if you don't market the marketing, what happens, Jason? If you've probably seen it even more than I have. You've experienced it more than I have. When the company's profits in CPG start to go down, they go to their CFO or they bring in a consultant, and it becomes spreadsheet math. They look to boost profit by cutting costs. And unfortunately, what happens more often than not, some of the first things to go are the field marketing program assets. And they start to lay field marketing off. And they don't realize until it's too late. Wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't have cut back on demos. Our sales are going back even further. So, field marketing managers out there, make sure you have the data and you're marketing the marketing and you're making presentations on a monthly basis showing the results, the positive results, the amount of product you're driving through the register and how it's impacting not only day of demo, but the numbers, the growth that's taking place at a store in the immediate days and weeks that preceded demo. And then, Jason, with these numbers, most people, the way they think about demos, they see it as a marketing expense. But the way you've structured your programs, just you have all of these different assets moving in the right direction, all of these drivers moving forward, and everything's clicking on all cylinders. When things are done right, these demos make a profit. They are not a loss leader that you necessarily don't reap the benefits until 6 to 9 months later. If you do it right, Jason's highlighted it, these demos can be a sales driver. And, there's too many people, I think, in this industry, they look at field marketing as an expense, as a marketing expense, that's the bucket and the budget it pulls from, when in reality, if things are done right, it is a true sales driver.
You nailed it right there, Sam. And I challenge anyone who's sitting behind the desk right now, building an annual operating plan, trying to figure out where their trade spend is going to land in an account. Just think about this for a minute. What if you were to take that 20% or 15% or whatever you're doing to put towards TPRs and say, okay, and I'm going to scratch this. I'm going to do coupons and I'm going to do demos. Just think about that for a minute. Because if you do it the strategic way, and obviously you can't do that in every retailer, and that's just, a dream come true scenario, right? Whole Foods. But obviously the CM is probably going to want to see some TPRs run in the year. But if you can get away from as many of those as you can, a coupon's like a scan. All of you guys have dealt with MCBs and chargebacks. I know it's 8-9%, whatever they're charging on top of just the MCB itself. It's incredible. And it's really hard to everybody complains about those chargebacks coming back, and it's really hard to plan around them. But you know what? If you don't have to worry about those chargebacks, you're in the sweet spot. Coupon redemptions. You're going to pay a little bit of a cost on that, but they're not making a ton of money at the clearinghouse on your brand. And that's something you really got to take into consideration. Your distributor, they make a lot of money on your brand. So, you can leverage demos in a lot of ways, and you just need to be as scrappy as you can when you're starting a brand. And to me, if you're going to spend money, spend it on demos. Find a way to win in a retailer doing demos, whether it's building a DSD network and just doing demos, like I mentioned in a retailer, or if it's going full board in with Whole Foods, like we mentioned. There are different strategies for each one, and that's why Sam and I exist. And we're here to share as much of this knowledge as we can on our podcast weekly. So we'd love for you guys to keep tuning in on Wednesdays at 8:30 in the morning. Sam, if you got anything else today, I think this has been a really fun.
Yeah, before we go, because I know we've gone over time here, but you said something again that resonated with me. You said spend money on demos. So I'm going to throw a hypothetical at you. Let's say you start your own brand. and whether it be a drink product or a food product, better for you product, and you get some angel investment or a small Series A of $5 million comes in. How much of that $5 million investment would you allocate towards demos?
5 million. I'm not going to joke around. Like, why bother doing anything else when I know the one strategy that's going to create trial awareness and build revenue? Because that's the only thing that I know will do that. TPR is great. The problem with the TPR, everybody else is on TPR at the same time you are on TPR. And unless you have the lowest price product on the shelf, and that customer is really intrigued on trying something new, chances are they're going to go with what they know. So this is the key. It's how brands have scaled up to this time. You really have to figure out where everybody else is going. Don't go there. Go the other way, and then you will succeed most of the time.
Well, that does it for the first ever masterclass from the Demo Guys podcast. Jason talked about it. We are here every Wednesday doing the Demo Guys podcast, 8:30 a.m. You can find us on LinkedIn LinkedIn Live. 8:30 a.m. every Wednesday, and then you can catch the replay on YouTube. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Jason for being generous with his time tonight. He's got a lot going on. I also want to thank our assistant producer, Lauren Walsh. She helped us out with a lot of the graphics. We're going to clip this show up probably and do a lot of post editing as well. Lauren is instrumental in that. We couldn't do this without Lauren. So Lauren, thank you very much. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and hopefully you check us out on LinkedIn. We've got all of our contact information there. It's been going on the ticker all show long, all webcast long. But looking forward to seeing you guys every Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m. This has been the Demo Guys podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.